So we start to wrap up the year and trying to take a very in-depth look at some of the best stories of the year, check into the markets, the economy and business. And we're starting that, in case you've noticed, and this raft of economic outlook and report and all of that are all part of the build-up to what you see here on Business Morning and on Channels Television. So let's look into the market. You talk about the equities market of the time, but part of what you do usually hear from the stock exchange trading floor is what we call the exchange traded products, or ETFs as they are known worldwide. That's where Victor Chiazo, the head of research at FSL Securities, is joining us from the trading floor this morning to have this look back into the year. Victor, good morning. This is a relatively small market, or small size of the market where you are seated. So track the ETFs for us.
Yeah, Bosun, morning. Good to be on your show once again. I think the market, in terms of the ETF space, has really not done well for the year 2019, and considerably so, because the entire market has been more or less bearish. It would be an error to see an ETF returning a 20% or a 40% return, especially when the underlying assets are equities which are listed on our market and which we have seen actually report negative year-to-date performance. But if you look at the ETF market as a whole, I think we can see that some have done well, the likes of the gold ETF, which tracks the price of gold. I think that has done well. And let's say the Vectiva Griffin 30 ETF, which currently posts a positive year-to-date performance of about 2.5% year-to-date performance. So aside that, the other 8 listed ETFs on the Nigerian Stock Exchange have not really done well, and we all know the reasons why most of these ETFs have actually returned negative year-to-date performance.
If at the moment we're looking at just about 10 listed ETFs, the total market value, or what you call the market cap, is around 6.5 billion naira. Compare that to the broader equities, even the bonds listed on the NSE. This is still a drop in the ocean. So explain a little bit what ETFs are really.
Yeah, ETFs are more or less a product which has invested in a pool of securities, a number of securities, which actually tracks an index. So what it means is more or less that the asset manager decides to invest in a pool of asset classes, either it's in equities, targets either the NSE 30, for example, or the banking sector, and brings these entire stocks together and lists it on an exchange. So an investor that wants to invest, let's say, in the banking sector and doesn't have that much time to actually effectively monitor the market, he can actually just talk to his broker to actually buy him a banking sector ETF or an NSE 30 ETF. And most of these ETFs actually track an index. So more or less, if you're looking at the NSE 30, like let's say you're looking at the Stanbic 30 index, which is actually mirroring the NSE 30. Once you're looking at the performance of that, your ETF you've invested in, you can mirror that performance with what the NSE 30 has done. So it gives an investor a pool of investments aside as against going into buying all these stocks individually. So it's more or less a diversified way of investing, and more or less you're owning only one stock in your portfolio. So that actually reduces the cost of investing in all these asset classes. But if you look at what the market has done so far, if you look at one of the most common one in our market, the NSE 30, which tracks the most capitalized stocks in Nigerian Stock Exchange, we have the Stanbic IBTC, which also have an index that tracks that. We also have the Vectiva Griffin. At the moment, NSE 30 is down about 19%, while the Vectiva Griffin is down about 16%. We only have Stanbic IBTC 30 ETF that is actually up to about 2.5%. So for an investor, once you look at those numbers, you can actually believe that, okay, I think the structure of the Stanbic IBTC 30 ETF seems like they know what they are doing. So actually, you can actually tell your broker, say, okay, I want to be part of that team managing that fund, and you can actually fund your account and have that in your portfolio. But in terms of the broader market space, the Nigerian market will currently have about 10 ETFs listed on the stock market. Look at the likes of South Africa. South Africa has about 78 ETFs. The likes of London Stock Exchange, which is one of the oldest stock exchanges, has about 1,256 ETFs listed on that market. But if you want to drill down further, you find out that you need to understand that it's a function of the entire market. The Nigerian market has about a total of 159 stocks listed on the market, both ASM and the main market, while the South African Stock Exchange, which is Johannesburg Stock Exchange, has about 356, while the London Stock Exchange has about 2,018 stocks. So it shows you that given the bigger size of the market, the need for ETFs will actually come into play, because for investors, both the retail and institutional, they might not have that time to track a market that has over 218 listed stocks. So the need for ETFs to actually come up to speed there, where investors will say, okay, instead of buying 10, 15, 20, 30 stocks, let me just invest in an ETF that actually tracks a sector or has a balanced portfolio. So I think for us, looking at our market, the first place would actually be to grow the market and grow active number of stocks that actually trade in the market. At that point, we can now begin to see the ETF space increase for the Nigerian Stock Exchange.
Yes, so Victor, the Nigerian Stock Exchange over the last couple of days have spoken about getting into the new year 2020 in the short to medium term, expand the basket or the portfolio of ETPs on our market, or ETFs as it were, to now include financial services. Will this be a game changer considering the banks and insurance? What do you think can be done with ETFs if you introduce ETFs on banks and insurance, perhaps the rates, the real estate investment trust that we have on our market? Do you think that would deepen the ETFs basket?
Yes, Borson. I think bringing in a variety of ETFs into the market will definitely deepen the market. But like I said earlier, we need a broader base to actually look at. If you look at the entire listed stocks on Nigerian Stock Exchange, we have about 150 on the main board, and we have about 9 listed on the Alternative Securities Exchange market, which is the ASM. And amongst these 159, if you look at deep down, you find out that you don't have more than 30 to 35 actively traded stocks in terms of liquidity in the market. So it means that it gives you little or no room for the asset players and the fund managers to play around. So creating ETFs around that space, you have a limited number of stocks you're tracking. But if we have quite a number of stocks listed on the stock exchange, let's say we increase that number over the next 2-3 years to about 400, 500, and you have about 50% of that actively trading, the need for ETFs will actually come into play. So you might begin to see ETFs in line of the telecom space, ETFs looking at the agro space, ETFs in the financial service space. And you begin to find out that investors will actually begin to look at that space, because they will not be able to track the entire market because of the number of activities happening in that space. So I think the focus will be actually to deepen our market and make the big companies out there come to the market and make it more broader for the investing public to actually see value in investing in ETPs. But at the moment, I think it would be nice for us to see ETFs that focus in the agri space, ETFs that focus in the telecom space, because we have quite a number of them and we have the big players now on our market. So I think bringing in ETFs in the financial space as well in 2020 will actually bring more options for investors in the years ahead.
Thank you so much, Victor Chazo, for wrapping that up for us on exchange-traded funds. Thank you so much, Head of Research at FSL Securities Limited. Thank you for coming on the program. And we thank our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. We have some breaking news at the top of the hour. Federal High Court in Lagos has a decision on a former Abia State Governor, Ojuzo Kalu, and 2 others, as well as a pipeline explosion, leaving a number of people dead in the backwater of Lagos. All of this at the top of the hour. This is Channels Television, where news never sleeps. I'll see you again tomorrow.